everyone, and thank you for joining us this Friday for yet another Taste Talk. Very excited to have a food demonstration today. I'm Christine Duke. I'm the Continuing Education Program Manager, and I manage all the Taste Talks that we have. And today, we actually have Sruthi Swaminathan, who is going to be doing her first demonstration for us. She is going to be sharing with us how she makes her own Indian style elotes. And if you're not familiar with elotes, that is a Mexican street corn. And Sruthi, I am so excited to have you take this away for us.
All right, thanks, Christine. Thanks everyone for joining. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sruthi. Like Christine said, I'm going to be talking about Indian style elotes today. A little bit about myself. I did my PhD in neuroscience, and then I worked in corporate doing consumer insights work for a few years. And then about a year ago, I decided to pursue my passion for food. So what that looks like for me is right now I'm a food business consultant in Chicago. I also started hosting pop-up dinners at my home, like multi-course pop-up dinners. Obviously that was pre-COVID, so I'm looking forward to getting back to that. And I'm also a chef, and I'm doing all sorts of, I've been entering in cooking competitions just for fun. I've been doing segments on TV, and I've really been enjoying it. So with today's recipe, it's actually one of my favorites. And elote is actually Mexican street corn. And what it is it's typically prepared as corn on the cob in a roasted form. And it has things like cumin and ancho chili powder and Mexican crema and things. And at the very end, it's garnished with lime, with cilantro, and with cotija cheese. So in today's version, I'm going to show you an Indian spin on this. And what that looks like is, I originally came up with it for the food competition I mentioned earlier that I was in. And I had pitched an Indian-Mexican fusion menu for that. And so this was one of the dishes that I decided to put on that menu. And maybe as I'm going along, you might notice there are some ingredients that you might notice are common between Indian and Mexican cuisines. So let's get started. I think, Christine, you may have the full ingredient and recipe list for anyone who wants it later on. Okay, yep, you may have the recipe list. So if anyone wants that in full, aside from what I'm doing now, we can do that. So, okay, let's get started. So for this recipe, the nice thing about this is there's minimal chopping involved, which I always enjoy. A lot of the flavor comes from the spices that I'm gonna add and some of the condiments that I'm gonna add later on. And in the middle, instead of roasted corn on the cob, we're gonna be using just frozen corn kernels. So that's another step of work that you don't have to do. So I'm gonna show you what I have right here. I'm gonna probably lift it up so you can see it. I have a few spices here, and what we're gonna add to the pot, I'll just tell you in order, and then we'll go ahead and start adding it. First, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on the pot. We'll bring you over here later.
I love that you've chosen to put together Mexican and Indian. There's such bold flavors, and they're gonna work amazing together.
Yeah, they're both flavors. And actually the way I came up with this is the cooking competition I entered last year was about coming up with a concept for a menu, and you submitted your ideas. And then the winner actually got to open up their own food stall in a hall in Chicago. So I ended up winning that competition. I was one of the 3 finalists, but it was cool to even start thinking about what would go on a menu. And I had a whole new appreciation for what chefs do in restaurants every day, because I did that once and it was exhausting. So all right, so I have the stove on. I'm gonna show you really quick what I have here. So I'm gonna start off, I'm gonna put some oil in, I'm gonna add onions and jalapenos. So these are 2 things you need to have chopped. I'm also gonna be adding a bunch of spices into the oil so they can release their flavors. And I'm gonna add that in pretty early on so the flavors can build but not burn. And the spices I have are curry powder. These are just gonna look like different shades of browns. It's not like you can smell them. So there's curry powder, there's turmeric, very little bit, garlic powder, and then I also have garam masala, and I have a 1-to-1 mix of cumin and coriander powder. So this 1-to-1 mix, you can buy it this way at the store, but I'm pretty sure the reason I have it like this is because I just had a little bit of each and I combined them, and they've just been sitting in a packet, so this gives me a chance to use it. And then after we're done, we're gonna be adding some toppings to the elotes, which are gonna be cilantro, cotija cheese, which I bought in a wedge and just grated, and then aloo bhujia, which looks like this at your local like Indian store. It's just spicy, I think they call them spicy potato noodles, and they're just these crunchy kind of things. And a little bit of lemon juice. So that's really, oh, and the corn, which is the main part of the dish. We have salt and coconut milk over there. Okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna put in some oil and get the onions going, and then you'll have a view of how the food's actually cooking in the pot. Okay.
We're moving into stove vision here.
Yep.
Awesome.
Can everyone see
Thank
that?
you. Yeah,
See the
that's
pot?
great.
Okay. Okay, I have to remember not to touch this. All right, so there's just some oil in the pot. Yeah, there's some oil in the pot now. I just turned on the stove on medium earlier. You wanna be careful not to let it burn, because then as soon as you put the onions in, they're gonna start to char, and you don't want that right away. So I have oil in there. It's probably hot by now. I'm gonna test just by, you can hear the sizzle of the onions. So I'm just gonna add the onions in first. So here I'm using a mix of purple and yellow or white onion. It doesn't really matter which kind you use. You'll probably get a little bit of a different flavor using something sweeter, like a Vidalia onion or something, but I feel like it just adds to the intrigue of what you're gonna get. So whatever onions you have on hand, you can add them. I love the flavor of onions. I was actually watching a video the other day, a cooking video, or it was one of those like what I bought at the grocery store videos. Does anyone else watch that? Like just when you're eating cereal, maybe?
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see what people grab when they're at the store compared to what we do in our house.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see. And this girl I watch has a toddler, and I have a toddler. And she was like, yeah, you know, at the store, I always make the mistake of buying too many onions. So this time I just bought one onion, and that was for 2 weeks. Like, I don't know what one onion is going to do for 2 weeks. And so it just goes to show how people cook differently.
Yeah.
And also how they eat differently. So, all right, the onions are in there. I'm just going to, again, have the heat on medium, and just to allow them to sweat a little and release their water, I'm just going to add a little bit of salt. And this is just kosher salt that I'm using, so it's less salty than your traditional like table salt. And I only recently switched to kosher salt, so it's taking me a little bit to understand how much you need to add to get to the right amount. But we can always adjust. If it's too little, it's not a problem. We can always adjust it.
Yeah, you can't remedy the other direction, so.
No, I've tried being like, maybe if I add more spice, and it doesn't work. Okay, so I'm starting to smell the onions. Another thing I want to mention here is of all the spices I mentioned, I also mentioned that I'm adding like garlic powder. You don't need to add garlic powder. I just had it and didn't feel like peeling a bunch of garlic right now, but you could add fresh grated garlic, you know, and that works really well in here. You can add some grated ginger if you'd like a little more of that flavor. It just so happens that right now I had garlic powder. It's a concentrated flavor, and I'm adding that. But again, know that you can substitute fresh garlic. You can add in ginger. You can use different kinds of onions. It's just to get the general flavors in first. And that's the nice thing about this recipe too, is you can really adapt it. If you want to make it, I'm making a creamier version just because in the Mexican street corn, there's Mexican crema or there's mayonnaise. I'm not using those. I'm going to be using coconut milk. If you don't want a creamier version, you want sort of a drier spice version, you can easily do that and just omit the coconut milk. So it'll just give you a different kind of flavor. Okay. Once the onions are starting to soften, I'm going to add the jalapenos. So I have one jalapeno here that I've just cut into bits like this. The smaller you cut them, the spicier they're gonna seam because they're all throughout. And also I did not seed these jalapenos just because we like some heat in it. And some of my friends have already asked to give them a little bit of this if there's any leftover afterwards, and I know their tastes. So
is it gonna be too spicy for them?
what was that?
Is it gonna be too spicy for them?
No, it's not gonna be.
Okay,
I know that. I mean, and if it is, they could, I don't know, have a glass of water. I guess I really know what. I don't really know what they're gonna do at that point. So, oh, looks like there's two camera situation. Okay, all right. Oh, there's not.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is in here, and once this starts cooking, I'm gonna start bringing over those spices that I mentioned earlier and add them in. At this point, if you find that there's maybe not enough oil, or the onions are starting to get a little bit darker than you would like at this stage, because remember, they're the first ones to go in, so they're gonna stay in longer. Okay, I'm starting to smell something a little like burny, hopefully not burny, but you want to make sure there's at least a little bit of oil in the pan when you add the spices in. Otherwise, the spices are going to burn right away, and then you're going to get kind of a bitter taste, which is not what we're looking for. So I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit, and I'm going to start adding the spices in. Okay, so here's the curry powder, turmeric. You need very little of turmeric. One, because a lot of times it's added just for a little bit of color. And a little bit of turmeric, you get a lot of color. It's also why I didn't wear white today. It's just, the stain doesn't come off anything. I spilled some on the counter yesterday and it does not come out. And then.
Remember one time a turmeric dish was spilled on the carpet.
That's it.
At Kendall, and that square of carpet had to go.
No, yeah, you can't. It's almost like less effort to do that. Okay, so I've added all the spice, and you can see there's just different shades of brown in here. Sometimes with garam masala, which is really a mixture of typically different proportions based on where you buy it, what batch you buy, of things like cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, red chilies sometimes. So there's different mixes of garam masala that you find that could be different tastes. So you just have to find one that you like. I know in India, and I know here, like, people will sometimes make them themselves, which is also great. I've had multiple batches of them at different times, and I'd use them in different dishes based on what flavor profile I was looking for. So now you can see, once I added all the spices in here, it looks like it's a little bit drier, and I want a little more oil. So I'm just drizzling a little bit in. That looks like a lot. It's not. It's very little. It's maybe like a tablespoon, which is a little for me. Once you start hearing that, I'm starting to be able to smell the spices.
What kind of oil do you recommend for this?
So for this, I'll typically use vegetable or canola oil. For me, those are pretty neutral tasting, and I don't see their flavors come through a lot. Have I made it with olive oil? Probably, just because sometimes I don't plan ahead in terms of what I'm making, and I'm like, this is what the oil I have. But when I use olive oil, I definitely taste a difference. It definitely doesn't taste, the flavors of the ingredients are there, but then it's sort of blended in with the flavor of the oils. Okay, and this is starting to get a little too hot, so I just turned down the heat. Okay, once I add all this in, the next thing to do is just add in the corn. So we have our base, and it's starting to smell really good. And you'll see once the corn's added in, it actually cooks quite fast. Is this corn? Okay, it just says, so it's just this like frozen corn. I think this is about 16 ounces. I think in the recipe I said about 24 ounces for this amount of proportion. So I'm just gonna add it in and see. The nice thing about adding this is I don't have to add water to dilute the flavor or to kind of scrape the bits off the bottom yet, all the flavor bits off the bottom, because there's a little bit of oil or water in the corn that's going to help do that for me as the corn cooks. So that maybe. Let's see.
Oh, I wish I could smell this.
It smells so good. I mean, You know, the thing about Indian food, I love how it smells. I love how the food itself smells, but I do not like smelling like it. You know, like I don't like smelling like any kind of food. But
Yeah.
what happens is, since a lot of the dishes I'll make are fusion dishes of some kind, you know, I'll make butternut squash soup and throw in some garam masala in there. I'll make a pasta dish and add coconut milk to it, you know. So because I add those kind of flavors, I feel like there's always this lingering smell that I have to be sure to like shut the bedroom doors and stuff. Otherwise all the clothes smell like it.
Yeah. Should you thaw the corn first?
So you can thaw the corn first. A little bit about me, I'm like a little bit impatient with my cooking. It's probably why I don't bake often or why I'm not a good baker. But I will say I have this corn sitting out of the freezer for maybe half an hour. And it's helpful in that it doesn't take as long to cook. But again, this is also corn. Now, if we were talking about a denser or bigger vegetable or even meat, like if you're making something with meat, I mean, you want to bring it out and leave it to come to room temperature, just something I've recently started doing. And I do see the difference. So if you can leave it out for 30 minutes or so, great. If not, if you just want to take it out of the freezer and put it in, that's fine too. Because the corn cooks so fast, it doesn't seem to make too much of a difference.
And then do you think you could do this recipe using corn on the cob too? Or would you recommend that people, you know, make the corn on the cob and slice off the corn? What would you think would work best?
Yeah, good question. I would, you can do it with corn on the cob. What I would probably do is still make this sort of masala base separately and then roast the corn or steam the corn and probably have some kind of a coating of either a little bit of the coconut milk on there so that the rest of the stuff can stick to it. But I will say you would still have to cook the spices separately. The raw spices on there probably wouldn't give the right flavor, but if you'd like to kind of make corn on the cob and then make this mix and then find a way to, I can even imagine making this mix and then grinding it up into a paste and then just spreading it or slathering it on the outside of the corn on the cob. So you still get that flavor. It's still cooked, but it's just in a different form.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, at this point, I'm actually gonna add a little bit more salt to this. I haven't tasted it yet. This is another thing I'm trying to work on is tasting things as I go, but
so important. You got to taste it all throughout.
I know. I'm just not there yet.
You need to like have a tasting spoon on you all the time. Like all our students have their tasting spoons, right?
I know. See, this is why I should have gone to culinary school. You know, like there's just these, I think sometimes things that come as second nature to people who are trained chefs or like trained for several years that I just kind of learned on my own and did what I felt like. So I'm learning constantly every day. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is, I said the corn doesn't really take that long to cook. So once it's gotten to this stage, I wish I could like just show you the stage, you know, like the al dente stage, but I can kind of hear it. I can kind of smell it. It looks like it's going in the right direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some coconut milk to it. So any can of coconut milk, I think this is like an almost 14-ounce can. Probably only need about half of this, but I'm going to add it and see how it goes and then decide the consistency that you want. So one thing I'll say is I try to add coconut milk, not at the very beginning. I just don't want it to simmer or cook for too long. I found that it can curdle a little bit. Not so much as kind of cream or milk, but it does it a little bit and I don't like that texture.
Yeah.
So, actually, I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar too, just to temper some of the spice flavors in there. I used to think, you know, what does half a teaspoon of sugar do? Like that's nothing, but it does make a difference, I found, in the very end. Okay, now this coconut milk, so it's liquidy, but it just has kind of the thicker parts up at the top. So I'm just gonna mix it up a little bit. So I don't want just the watery bit in there because that's not where all the flavor is.
That's not all of the good fatty part of it.
Yeah, I know. And I usually try not to buy low fat coconut milk. I think if I'm committed to putting coconut milk in a recipe, I want it to be
whole hog.
yeah, that's just the flavor that I was imagining. So, okay, I'm just stirring this. I'm just gonna add about, I guess I'm just gonna add the whole can. This is then gonna simmer for a little bit. And you can see for the amount of corn that we've added, turn up the heat. It's actually a good amount because some of this will evaporate and then in the end you'll be left with sort of a thicker consistency. Okay. The idea too is you don't want the onions to be a complete pulp in this case. You want them to have some texture, some mouthfeel to them. But to the question someone asked, can you make this with corn on the cob? If you're grinding it, that's obviously different and you're intensifying the flavor when you put it into a paste. All right, at this point, I'm gonna taste it. Wish me luck. Okay. I just don't know like when it's fair to taste it. I feel like once it thickens and once it gets into the corn.
Taste the whole time.
Yeah. It's definitely spicy. It needs more salt and it needs to thicken. So it'll get there though. It's not going to be an utter failure.
No, I mean, it looks great.
Yeah. And with this, you can.
Some great colors in that.
Yeah, I'm a fan of making things that I can eat in different ways. You know, so I don't want to, it's kind of how I buy my ingredients. I don't like to buy an ingredient if I can just use it for 1 or 2 recipes. I'm always trying to think, what else could I put this in? Or even if I don't think that ahead of time, if I have it left over in my fridge, this is something I do where every time before I go grocery shopping, I try to empty out my fridge to like 10% capacity. And the 10% is mostly, hopefully, condiments, sauces, and drinks, right? So other than that, I want to have a pretty empty fridge because in that way I'm not wasting anything, and in a way it helps me be creative. So even in kind of coming up with dishes for that Indian Mexican fusion menu, I was really thinking about what are things that I consistently have in my fridge that aren't too much of a stretch to think, oh, could this be this cuisine? Could this be that cuisine? Could I incorporate this sauce? Could I incorporate these spices? And I kind of get a lot of energy from just thinking about ways to be creative with the ingredients and coming up with new things.
Yeah, I'm like thinking of ways that like after you have this and use it as it's like as your traditional recipe is, having it in the form that you're about to show us and everything, what could you do with it next? How can these leftovers be reinvigorated? And it's like, I've already got like 3 ideas in my head. Happen. So there's a lot of possibilities. So
definitely. I mean, you can have this with, you can have this just as a side that you're just eating out of a bowl as like a snack. I've had this for breakfast before. It's great, right? You can also think about mixing it in with rice. You know, rice is something that I do eat a lot, and like my toddler eats, and he likes things that he can pick up with his fingers. So you could eat it with rice. I've also, when I've made versions of this that are thick enough or either without the cream at all, I put them in tacos. You know, so I've had it as like almost a topping for tacos, but with something mild on the bottom, like a mild fish that's just salt and pepper seasoned, and then this brings the punch of flavor.
I was thinking it could even go into a tamale.
Yeah, it could, as one of the items. Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think this is actually almost done. We're just waiting for it to simmer. I'm gonna do last bit of salt. And then we're just gonna plate it. Then I'll show you all the toppings that go on there. And I always say, you know, you can make a big batch of this so it'll keep, but realistically what happens is like it lasts a day or 2 because
it's good.
Yeah, it's good, and it's the thing that like I love eating chips. You know, if there's chips in the house, I'm always just eating chips. And if I have this, I'll be like, no, I'll eat this heavy cream coconut corn that I made. That's, you know. Okay. again. It's still a little watery, and I also find with this, it's even better the next day as the sauce is just kind of congealed, and as all the flavors have a time to meld together, it tastes even better the next day. So it's kind of like pasta and pasta sauces in that way. So that's really good. Okay. So now I'm just going to plate this. All right. Oh, oops.
Yeah, I think your video got. There we are. Fabulous.
Okay. Yeah.
Someone's asking, could you serve this item cold or room temperature?
You can serve it cold. It could be a nice like cold addition to a salad. I've done that before, where I have a bunch of greens and I just want a topping. I'll add this, and it adds enough flavor, it adds enough texture, it adds enough color, so you can definitely eat this cold. Okay, and then.
Bye, stove.
Okay, and then we're moving it here. Can you guys see that? Okay. So once you have it in the bowl, just like that, it's all made. You're going to add some toppings. So this is another opportunity for you to get really creative with it. What I have here is something just really simple. I have some cilantro. I'm just going to add that. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I'm also going to add some cotija cheese, so that brings a little bit of that Mexican flavor to it. Instead of cotija, I've also used Parmesan, which works really well. Like the nuttiness and a little bit of saltiness of that I found works really well. And then for some texture and some color, you're going to add the Aloo Bhujia, which is the, and then I'm going to just add a little bit of lemon juice to it. So that's what that looks like.
Lovely. Oh, that looks
And
good.
yeah, and then I'm gonna try it. And once you, what's this called? Once you like arrange it all nice and then take your photo.
Yep, you've always got to take your social media pics.
Yeah, and then you like clean up all the edges and you take a really nice photo. Then you can mix it up because you really want to get a taste of everything that's in here.
Yeah, and get all those textures and everything.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna add some more of this.
Yeah, I need to get some of that in the house, definitely.
Yeah, you can find it. So I don't know where everyone joining lives, but if you're in Chicago, there's an Indian store in the West Loop. It's called Metro Mart. It's a small store, but it has basically everything you could need if you want to make something Indian. And the nice thing about getting these spices again is you can use them in so many different ways. So it's not like you're going to buy turmeric and you're never going to use it again. You can use it as a marinade, in a marinade for chicken with yogurt. You know, you could sprinkle it on Brussels sprouts before you roast them in the oven. You could use it on fish. So it's really pretty versatile. That's just one example, but okay, I'm going to try it. Hot, but very good.
Mm-hmm.
The last kick of lemon at the end is really nice. And another thing about the lemon, I would avoid adding the lemon into the hot pot while it's still cooking, because the longer any kind of acid is in there on heat, I found that it just makes it more bitter. Is that right? Any culinary student, like people who know the full science?
Yeah, I'm getting nods over here, so yeah.
Okay, great. I've just found that it makes it more bitter. So I always turn off the heat and then stir in the acid. In this case, it's lemon. You could use lime if you want. I think in traditional elote, it's usually lime. You could, I know for different forms of acid, not really for this, but I've used like red wine vinegar for different things before. So it really makes a difference. You might think it's just a tablespoon of something, but it really makes a big difference in the taste. So,
yeah, it really gives it like extra brightness and it gives it like a little bit of a cleaner finish too.
especially because the spices in here are such warm spices. They're, like you mentioned at the beginning, they're all pretty bold flavors. And then the coconut cream is adding another layer of kind of richness to it. So it's nice to be able to balance that with both the cilantro and with the lemon juice at the very end. So that's how you make that.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, if anyone has questions.
Oh, we get applause. So
yeah.
Does anyone have any additional questions at all? You're more than welcome. Now that we've completed the demonstration, if you want to open up your mics and ask any questions at all, you can. So this has been fantastic. I know people are going to be making this because they've been saying so. So who's going to make it? I think I'm going to make it too. I can totally handle it.
Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, and I think, Christine, you have the recipe. I can modify it a little bit based on kind of proportions I used today because they seem to work, especially with like amount. And I know the kind of the meticulous and methodical way to cook is to know the amounts and know the time and know, and I, again, don't cook like that. So I kind of make it up as I go.
That's why we give them the recipe. This is more like, okay, we want the whole show and to see you do it, action and everything.
Yeah.
And once they're ready to go back, they're not taking notes. They're watching and enjoying.
Good.
So
I'm glad.
You guys can get the recipe if you don't have it already. It's at your fingertips. And then definitely we're going to have more coming from Sruthi in the future. And so she's had some experience working on pitches with reality shows and stuff. There's some potential topics there.
Yeah.
That I think some of our culinary students might be interested in too. So definitely anything you would like to say before we wrap it up for today?
No, thanks everyone for joining. This has been a fun experience. The only thing is I have like a bunch of dishes to do now, but I guess that's just what happens when you try to be super organized and you try to like lay it all out. But no, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks, Christine, for the opportunity. And thanks everyone for joining. And then once you have the video, I'd be happy to share it.
Yeah. So if any of you haven't been to the Taste Talks before, please know that almost every single Taste Talk that we've done, there's been a couple that missed in the beginning, but almost every single Taste Talk has been recorded and is on our YouTube channel. If you do not have the information on the YouTube channel, again, email taste@nl.edu and I can get you that information. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you again, Sruthi. This was fantastic.
Right, take care.
People are going to be soon. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.